Okay, so this is going to be a review of some of the level blueprint work. So we kind of already did blueprint work for doors and elevators, but I want to kind of take a quick review of this, so you guys can just follow along and humor me again. So the first thing we want to do is let's just place a point light back into level. We did this last week, but this is going to be useful to review again. And I'm just going to make this thing bluish in color and crank up the intensity so it's obvious. And I want to set up a blueprint so that when I touch a trigger, that light turns off and on again. The key here is that we're going to do this all inside the level blueprint to start. And then we're going to make a class blueprint which does the exact same thing but allows us to change the behavior of the blueprint so that it is bound to the light instead of being in the level light cell. So here's our light trigger that when I walk over it, it turns off. So I'm going to take a box trigger here, and I'm just going to make this thing lined up with the light. Scale this guy up. Okay. Anytime you want to interface with anything in the level, you can grab a reference to it if you go into the level blueprint with the light selected. So here's my level blueprint. I'm going to click on my light and create a reference to it here. All right. And then click on my trigger, my box trigger, which I can never seem to select, but I'll select it here. And I'm going to add two events for overlapping. One is going to be begin, and another one is going to be end. And from this light, I'm going to just toggle visibility, like so. So that when I step into the light turns off. When I leave, the light turns on again. Okay, were you guys able to get that same behavior? Okay. Joey, did you have any questions about this stuff so far?
No.
Okay.
I had Dustin helping me with it a little bit.
Okay. Cool.
How do you get the toggle visibility?
I dragged a wire from the point light, so I took the point light reference and I did here toggle visibility, like so. So, if I asked you guys to make like 50 of these guys, would you hate me?
Yeah.
Well, let's just make 3 of these. Okay, let's just make 3 of these lights that can be copied and pasted. So I'll try to create 3 duplicates of these guys, these triggers and the scripts. Let's just go 5. Screw it. We're just going to do 5. I want these triggers to turn off the light. Cool, that one works. None of these work. None of the other lights work to toggle on and off. You guys understand why? Like, I copied and pasted the lights here. I have 5 of these lights. But how many lights does my blueprint handle? Right here? It's just 1, right? You ran into this, John.
Yeah.
Okay. How about if we made a lot more than these? What if we made like 50 of these guys? I'm going to select all the lights in the boxes. I'm just going to start duplicating them in the hopes of trying to get these things working. Maybe I don't do 50 because that's a little bit overkill. I have that many lights, and I want them all to turn off just like this. How would I script that? Go here, copy paste. Oh good, it doesn't even copy paste that one. In fact, I can't even copy paste it. I have to literally go through, click on the light, go here, add a reference to the light 2, click on light number 3, go here, add a reference to light number 3, maybe I can save some time by doing this kind of thing. Select them all. Like that. Cool. I have a bunch of trigger boxes. Okay, I need to make sure I select the right trigger boxes for the right light. I'm just going to say that seems okay. Add event. You can overlap. Okay. Now I just need to toggle the visibility. Crap, I missed the end overlap. Go back here. Okay, so I need an end overlap event. Does this seem like a good way to work to you guys? No. This is how you would have to do it in Unreal 3, by the way. Exactly how you'd have to do it in Unreal 3. Does it make sense what I'm doing, though, at least?
Yes.
Like I'm going through and hooking up each separate trigger?
You can't use the same node, though. Like
yes. Yes, you can use the same node. So that part you can actually have, you can duplicate that. By the way, don't ever do this. This is not the right way to do it. I think I'm making my point, right? Is it clear why this is bad? Hopefully.
Well, it's pretty messy.
Well, also, yeah, it's definitely messy. I mean, there's no doubt that this thing is going.
Like it's probably taking way longer than it has to.
Yeah, not only that, but like, okay, what if I want to change it so that the light also changes color after I enter the volume?
Then you'll have to do that individually for each light.
Yeah, what if I want each light to be a different color when you touch it, right? What if I want to add 100 or 1,000 of these things? What if I want to add like, okay, I'll just drag all these guys and I'll duplicate them here. Well, that's not going to work. So this right here, while I definitely did the work, you'd probably get fired if you got something like this in one of our Overwatch graphs. Like there are huge problems with this, namely, not the least of which is like the messiness of this graph, but a lot of it has to do with the maintainability of this graph too. Like if I added more triggers, or even if I accidentally connected the wrong trigger or missed one, then one of like 10 lights will be broken, right? And if I want to add more functionality to these lights, I have to go through and do it for every single one. And I can't easily duplicate these lights either. So I can't take just one of these guys and copy paste it. I have to actually copy paste it, then hook up the blueprint for each one of those lights that I duplicate again. Okay. So let's do something a little bit better. I'm going to get rid of all of this. I'm going to delete all of my lights. So you guys are welcome to delete all of your lights and your triggers as well, because we're not going to need them. So I'm deleting all my point lights. So if anyone's ever used Unity, class blueprints are very much like a prefab in Unity. They're very, very similar as far as how they function. So the biggest thing about a class blueprint compared to a level blueprint is that a class blueprint kind of combines all the things you want to do with an object into one convenient little package that you can then reuse as much as you want, and that convenient little package can be used across multiple levels. It can be used and copied and pasted as much as you want without any fear of having to duplicate work. You make a class blueprint once, and you can reuse that as much as you want, and it's very easy to copy and paste and change properties of those class blueprints. So up to this point, we've only been doing level blueprints, but now we're actually going to make a class blueprint. So there are, don't be intimidated by this. All of these are just still class blueprints. All these buttons are doing is trying to make it easy for you to decide what kind of class blueprint you care about. 99% of our class blueprints are going to be this actor type. So that's going to be most of what we're going to be making. And actor is basically just any object that can be placed in the world or spawned in the world. So an actor in Unreal is like a cube, or this player start, or a light, or this thing is an actor. Basically, anything you can like click on is considered an actor in Unreal. So when you make a new class blueprint, you're usually going to be making something that's like an actor. Pawns are things that can be controlled with a mouse and keyboard or with a controller. So like with your 360 controller or with WASD. Characters are things that can physically walk around. So these are things that have bipedal logic typically, so they can be moved. Player controllers are it kind of represents you as the player behind the monitor. And then game modes are the blueprint that defines like what like the win and loss conditions for your game are. So let's make an actor blueprint together. So once you make a class blueprint, it's going to ask you where you want to put it. Typically, I put them all in the blueprints folder, and I like to prefix them with BP.
Which one are we supposed to choose? Or we choose?
In here. 99% is going to be actor.
Okay, actor.
So yeah, make actor. And I like to prefix my blueprints with just BP. And I'm going to call it a toggled light. And I'm going to make sure it goes into the blueprints folder. Okay. Cool. So you should see this like blueprint editor come up. Just a quick aside, if I go back to the content browser, I can see in my blueprints folder down here, there's my new toggle light. It's actually physically a thing that becomes an asset that I can click on. Okay. There are three, in the top right, there are now 3 different views into this blueprint editor. This guy here, the Components tab, is kind of where you're going to be building your blueprint up like with Lego bricks, essentially. You're going to be combining all kinds of different components like lights and static meshes and particles and sounds. You're going to combine them all together, and you're going to bring them into this view, and that's going to represent what your guy looks like in-game. So this is where you're going to be building your blueprint up. So one of the first things we're going to do is we're just going to add a light, and it's going to be a point light. So I'm just going to, in the top left here, under Add Component, I'm going to search for a point light, which is going to place one of these guys in essentially my working area. It's kind of like where I bring together all the different pieces of my blueprint. And I can change the light color here. Like so. And maybe crank up the intensity. So after you place a point light, let's just place one of these blueprints in the level. And placing the blueprint in the level is just as easy as taking your blueprint for your that you just made and dragging it into the scene. And there's my light. So I want to make sure everyone has that. So my blueprint literally just has one point light in it, and then I drag and drop it into the level.
But all it is just a light, right?
It's just a light right now. You got it?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because you can have multiple lights in one blueprint, though, too, if you want it. Like, you can have 3. So why don't you add, like, 2 more lights, and then make one, like, red, make one green, make one blue.
They'll all go in the same scene, or the same workspace?
Yeah, just keep adding components from the top left button. Can you make a class blueprint? Something that means, because this is going to go in the list with everything else. So yeah, I can add another point light here. Move this out of the way. I'm going to make just 2. I have a red one and a blue one. And those here in my scene now, I have a red and blue light that are together. So when we made a toggled light in the level blueprint, we placed one of these box triggers in the level. We dragged one of these guys into the level, and that became the thing that we looked for overlap behavior on. Well, you can do the same thing in a blueprint. So I have my 2-point lights here. And if you want to add a trigger, just add a component that's called the box. And then in this case here, I'm going to make the box encompass both the lights. So add a box and scale it up so it kind of like encompasses your lights. You should be able to see it in game as well. So there's my what's that? Which lights? The point lights? Yeah. You're going under here and you're typing light? You have to be in your blueprint. Yeah, I'm in the blueprint. Okay, yeah. Just go over here. Add component. Modify the copy from bottom left. Get the box, John? Yeah, good to go. Okay. So now that we have our box, yeah, what's up?
Why does the first point light say root?
So the first component that you add to a blueprint is always going to act as your root component, which means everything else is parented to that guy. So notice that this guy I can't move. Like I have my point light selected. I can't actually move or scale. Like I'm trying to move this guy. You cannot move the root because he represents where your blueprint will be in the world. What you usually do, or what I'm going to show right after this, is you usually don't make the point light the root. You make a different thing the root. But notice here I have rotation controls for my light, and here I don't, like, because you can't move or scale your root. So
would you want your root to be like a transparent block or something?
Yep, which is actually what is this thing for. Just a generic dummy scene is essentially an empty blank box that you can use.
The center of your grid.
Exactly. It basically represents the origin for your pivot for this blueprint, which right now our pivot is actually the point light. So the next thing I want you guys to do before we go on to the blueprint part is rename this box to be trigger, because the names here are the names that are going to show up in blueprint. So after so many years in the industry, one of the biggest things I found to be useful is naming things well, because you might just not give a shit at the time and just name things whatever, but it only helps you develop the habit of naming things. At least give it like 2 seconds of thought and like just name it something reasonable, because it will save you time later in the end. And because every time I have like point light 1, point light 2, box 1, box 2, like I have to take a minute to figure out like, oh, did box 1 mean the trigger that turned off the light, or is that the trigger that like spawned a particle? I can't remember. If I would have just named them correctly, it actually saves me a bunch of time. It's even equally doubly important here because Blueprint will take the name here and translate it. So now in the top right, between components, next to components is our graph. And this is just like the level blueprint. So this has all the same functionality and a little bit more from what the level blueprint has. But this blueprint here is only running on our actor that we created, our double light with a box. So nothing else is running. This only runs when we've actually created one of these guys in a level. But we can do the same thing here. We have, look on the left, these are all the things. You can imagine that this list on the left is the same, is almost like the same as this list up here in our scene outliner. So our scene outliner contains every actor that's in our level, right? Over here, the components, this is every component that's in our blueprint. It's the same kind of idea. So notice here there's point light 1, point light 2, and trigger. This corresponds directly to what I have here in the components list. So I have my trigger. I can click on my trigger and I can right click and I can type overlap. And I have on component begin overlap. And I can add an overlap for when it ends, like so. Okay? This is exactly the same as the overlap events that we used in our level blueprint. This is the blueprint that you're making right now, the light one. If you look in the top right, Christian, there's a graph. And now what you can do is you can take these point lights and we can toggle them on and off. So how do we actually toggle off these point lights? I want to take these guys and create a reference of them in the blueprint. So remember, when I actually placed a point light in the level, I'm just going to show you again. So I had a point light and I selected it. Then I went to my level blueprint and I said, hey, create a reference to a point light. I want one of these guys in my blueprint. And the way you do that is you take one of these, whichever one you want to care about, which I guess I'll take point light 1, and you drag it into the blueprint. You want to get that point light, and then now you can drag a wire from it and say toggle visibility on it. Okay. This thing here, when you drag one of these guys from your components list to the scene, you get an option of whether you want to get that thing or you want to set that thing. This basically, do you want to just get a reference to him or do you want to change who he is? So I'm going to grab both point lights and I'm going to toggle visibility. Yeah, Joey, what's up?
If I have, I right click, toggle visibility, I see a node that specifically says target is BP toggle light C, where yours says the scene component.
Let's see here. Which one? You mean like here when you just right click? So you see one of these things here? You see 3?
Right. Would that do the same as if I were to just
it'll do the same thing as if you dragged it in and dragged a wire. So yeah, if you just type toggle visibility.
So I have the toggle light blue. This is just going to automatically toggle my blue light.
Target is BPD. Yeah. So that one you can just you don't need to plug that in.
Okay.
So the way you created that, you can. So the way I made it, see how the target is the actual light. In my case, I'm targeting the scene, which is targeting the root. So if you want to toggle the visibility on a red one, another way you can do it is you can drag a wire from him, and you can type toggle visibility on him. So let go and then type toggle visibility. So see how they're the same? They're actually the same exact function. This one is targeting a scene component, but also then your light. This one is targeting your blue light here. So this one you don't need to change the target. You can actually just this guy works by himself.
Right. Okay.
So
as long as he's getting the input.
Yeah, and so I'm doing it this way.
Okay.
Test it and make sure it works. Like run it through your light. Now when you run in the game, it should toggle off both of the lights for your blueprint. See there, you can see the lights are turning off and on. You have nothing? Did you place one of them in the level? Yeah. Did you place your blueprint in the level? Oh, no. You just drag it into the level. That guy is your blueprint. Okay. You drag him into the level. Yeah. And I would just delete the other lights. You don't need those. Okay. There's our blueprint and the lights. Let's couple together. So now what you can do, we're gonna take this one blueprint, we're gonna kind of supersize it. We're gonna do a lot more with it. Let's first off duplicate it like 10 times, because that just to prove that now we can take this blueprint, and I can take this guy, and I can just create many copies of these guys, like so. All my lights. And as I walk over each of them works correctly. I don't have to do any extra work to have them work on their own. So all the lights are turning off and on by themselves. Right, so each of these guys is their own special actor that can be copied and reused over and over again. Which invisible box? Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes
We can change that too. It's because those things are actually set to block the physics objects. Okay, so let's do something a little bit more. I'm going to place this light along the wall here. Let's make it into more of a sconce type thing, something you can actually use in the level. So I'm going to go to my blueprint, and I'm going to place a static mesh now. I'm going to add a static mesh to this guy, to my component. I'm going to name him sconce. So I just went to my blueprint editor, and I went to components, and I added a static mesh from here. And here, I can type wall, lamp wall. I can add one of these wall lamp things to my scene. And the sconce, just add a static mesh, Christian. Just go here and add a static mesh, and then I just changed the mesh here to look for wall lamp.
What's the name of the sconce?
Lamp wall. And I'm actually going to delete my other light because the second light doesn't really help me in this case. So now when I go to my blueprint in the level, there's my sconce. We're going to make it so you have to press a key to interact with this guy. I'm actually going to put him up against the wall here. Yeah, I removed the second light, and then it gave me a blueprint compiler error because I had two toggle visibilities, so I removed the second one, and that fixes that. Okay, you guys have sconce meshes? Take a look at it.
I have my sconce. And then compile it. Why is it having a play?
Show me. That's simulation. So that just plays only in the blueprint window.
Oh.
So that doesn't actually play the say no. You don't want that. Go back to the blueprint. Open, go here. Go here. Can you compile it here for me? Okay. Oh, your level probably actually walk up to it and interact with it. Okay. I want to make this thing look better, but this will have to do for now. There's our sconce. So currently this thing turns on and off every time you walk. So as I get close to the light, it turns off, and then as I walk away, it turns on again. What we want to do instead is make it so that just walking up to it isn't enough. We'll make it so you have to press a key to actually turn it on. I really don't like how this thing is positioned. So I want this thing to turn on when I press a key and tell me that it should, I have to press a key as well. So what we can do is just change our behavior. We have this trigger that always turns it off right away. Instead, what we want to do is we want it so that when you press a key, it turns it on and off, but only when you get close to it. So what we can do is I'm going to disconnect this toggle visibility from the overlap. And when you touch this sconce, what we're going to do is we're going to tell the game, hey, the player wants to interact with this blueprint that we created. So on begin and end overlap, instead of toggling visibility, we are going to what is it called? Input. We are going to add the ability for the player to interact with it. So I want you to right-click anywhere in the blueprint and type Get Player Controller. And the player controller is you. This guy represents you. This is representing you behind the mouse and keyboard, because we're going to tell this guy that we want to enable input. So let's see here. So what you can do is, once you guys all have Get Player Controller, I just right-clicked and typed Get Player Controller in the blank space in the blueprint, like that, which gave me this guy here. And then what we're going to type is enable input. It's going to enable us to receive input for that player. And by default, it likes to connect the player controller as a target. I want you to disconnect the player controller from the target and plug the player controller into the player controller plug here. So it should look like that. So I have enable input, and then in the bottom player controller link, I have Get Player Controller plugged in. So the reason why we have to do this is that we want, we want to make sure that when you press a key, this blueprint can respond to it. And by default, just by pressing a key, the blueprint doesn't know that this actor cares about it. Just by pressing a key, the blueprint doesn't know that the actor cares about it. So by doing this, we can say, hey, when you get close to this blueprint, we can now care about player input. And likewise, I need to disable input when I leave the trigger volume. So we're also going to disable the input for the player controller. So same kind of deal, except instead of enable input like this, you're going to disable input down here. This is something you're going to have to do anytime you want to, let's say you have like in Zelda or like in Skyrim or any game where you walk over an inventory like a pickup, and you want to press F to pick it up, or you have like a lever or a button and you need to interact with it, this is exactly what you're going to have to do like every single time. So if you want a button to be connected to something that your blueprint wants to do, then this is what you're going to have to do every time. Because doing this now enables us to say, hey, I can right-click anywhere and I can type F, just the letter F, which will give me this key event for F. And now I can connect that here to toggle visibility. I just right-clicked and I literally typed the letter F, and the first thing it selected was the right thing. And I plugged that into toggle visibility. This guy right here, this F key, will not work unless you do this.
So if you, where it says press and release, if you select release, that means when you push F, the light will come on. When you release it, like when you take your finger off the F, it'll go back off.
That means that it'll only turn it off. Yeah, so if you want to, when you press the key, you can toggle it. If you want to also have release toggle it, it means that it'll turn on as long as you're holding down the key. Yeah. So like here, if we can do that.
So like for like a sprint, if you wanted to like hold down shift to sprint.
Right, and then let go of it, release it. Exactly, that's why there is a press and a release for both. Okay, so now we have this. If you play it now, walking up to the light by itself does not turn it on or off. By hitting F, I can toggle the light myself. Right? And every time I press it, the toggle visibility wire activates. And if I'm not close to it, nothing happens. So let's do one more little thing with this. Did you guys all get this? Does it all work? Let's do a little bit more. One thing that's cool about Unreal is that you can do all kinds of 3D text work. So if you go back to your components and just add a text render, you get this nifty like 3D world text. And I'm going to just drag this out so it says like, hey, press F to, I'm going to drag this out so I can see it in front of the sconce. And I'm going to change the text to say, hey, press F to toggle. And I'm going to make it horizontally aligned, like so. Your tab, you can just double click on it from here in the blueprints tab on the bottom left. Make sure it's in the blueprints folder. Check your root folder for blueprints. Here, let me show you. Click on the root and then go to filters. Let's change it so this text should only be visible when you actually can interact with it though. So it should be toggled on when you get close enough and toggled off when you get far away. Can you guys do that right now? Like make it so this text only shows up when you're actually inside the collision while I figure out like a cool font to use for it. Overwatch font. Do you guys get the text only showing up when you get close enough to it? It's cool.
No, I can't. How do I get it? I can't remember where I get my list of things is in here. Oh, that's because I have this.
Oh, you have the filter. Yeah.
Try to do that.
Like someone's hacking apart a cow or something.
They were there yesterday, like hammering and all kinds of shit was going on.
Oh, really? Yeah. That does kind of suck. Sorry, I'm just figuring out a font I want to use for this thing.
I don't even know which I have down. I don't know if it's that way or the way. That way, I don't know which way. Well, with my life though.
Yeah, so that text, toggle it just like you would toggle a light when you touch it. You can use toggle visibility to turn it off.
It's supposed to be in this construction script.
No, in the event graph. So you need to toggle the visibility so it turns on when you get close to it and turns off when you leave it off. But only, so not when you press the F key.
Yeah, I realized that.
And you might need it to be hidden by default. And if you need it to be hidden by default, in the bottom left of the property grid for that text, you probably want to check that to be invisible. Because you don't want it to be visible unless you get close to it.
Okay, so I needed to connect to here. I can't make a new begin overlap for a trigger, right?
Right.
So I have to link it to this.
You can just connect it to that one.
So I just do another reactor?
No, you can connect it to the other enable input that you're doing. Like just do it after you enable the input.
Oh, in here?
Yeah.
Where you put the toggle visibility after the second little arrow.
Yeah, so think back. What was the first thing that we did with this blueprint? The very first thing we did. We had a begin overlap, toggle the visibility on the light. So that's exactly what you're going to do with this thing. This text renderer, you need to toggle the visibility on it when you overlap with the trigger, just like you would with the light. It's exactly the same thing as toggling the light. So on begin overlap, you're going to toggle it, and on end overlap, you're going to toggle it as well. And it's no different. It's just because this text doesn't actually change the effect of these.
Oh, so I'm actually linking. I'm just trying to figure out what I'm actually supposed to be linking. I'm taking this. I'm linking this.
Yes.
This also.
Yes.
And then kind of place for this stuff.
Yeah, you can move, yeah, you can move all that stuff out.
And now the off by default thing.
Oh, it's in the, go back to your components, not the graph.
See, so yeah, you want it off by default though.
Okay, yeah.
So go to your components
Oh, just scroll down there and turn it off in visibility.
and just turn off the text renderer.
Yeah.
Go down all the way to the bottom. Invisible. So now it's off by default. Now when you play.
Now I can make Rust.
This showing the 3D text thing, it's like I said, it's not, we use it in a sconce, but it could totally be a pickup, right? It doesn't have to be this thing. So as another test, can you guys make it so that after you press F, that it destroys the actor? So you essentially pick up the sconce. So instead of toggling off the light, you're actually picking up the light. So press F should destroy the actor. just like you did for the pickup.
So not like Skyrim.
Yeah, exactly. I'm stealing everything in your house.
Wait, so now press F is going to toggle, it's gonna, instead of toggle visibility, it's gonna destroy actor.
Yes. Yeah, you just want to destroy actor.
Couldn't we just add another key to it so that we can still have F turn the light on and off, and then
Sure.
like put like S or
Yeah, as for pickup or whatever.
yeah.
You can do that.
Or
E or destroy button. Try to destroy actor, not destroy component.
how did we bring in the keys again?
Just type the letter of the key that you care about. That's it. That's all you need. So F will now destroy the actor. But like John said, if you want, you can have a different key destroy the actor and have F destroy. You picked it up. It's totally an inventory item, right?
You're making your house.
Like stealing, selecting things.
And it'd be destroyed.
Actor. You have to select it right now.
Component that we need to cancel. Because it looks like I have destroy component. I can destroy the light.
You can destroy the
All the
individual
actual
parts of
lights.
it. Yeah, this thing will destroy everything. So yeah, everything goes away. And that's it. That's all you need. And that'll clear it up.
This link can utilities.
You don't need to do that. That's
Toggling anything.
That's it. That's all you need.
So how does it know what actor I'm destroying?
See the target? It says destroy self. So self is me. So destroy itself.
But
See, it actually has a variable in
so
there.
isn't self? Oh, self is this.
Self is this whole thing. It's
Not me,
everything.
but
Yeah.
this.
It's this whole thing.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So now if I go over here, and push F and light on and off, or I can push E and that.
And now it's gone forever.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Okay.
And then if I make it, or if I release it, or unrelease to it, then I can, no. that
You
doesn't
can't
work.
undestroy it.
That's stupid. Yeah, that's stupid.
Okay. We'll get into the construction script next week. I don't really see a point to talking about it yet. Other than to let you guys know what it is. It tends to be a little confusing before we talk about variables, but keep in mind that there are two scripts that you can be editing. In the top left, see how it says construction script and event graph at the top for your blueprint here? These are both blueprints. They're both blueprint editors. The difference is that this graph runs after you've pressed play. The construction script runs before you've pressed play, as long as you're in the editor, and it runs every time that something changes with your blueprint. Okay? So there's something, so does that make sense? This guy here runs after you've pressed play. The construction script only runs outside of your game. This only runs for you right now as the level creator, as the level designer. This script is only useful for you, okay? This is meant for you to write tools or to make things easier for other people that are using your blueprint to be able to edit things. Like this is where you would edit the ability to set the light color, for instance, which we'll get into later. Okay. Why don't we take a break for half an hour? We'll come back and then we'll finish up with variables and some more fun work. Yeah. So come back in half an hour, please, and then we'll resume the lecture.